Uh, First of all, what is sensitivity? As we are discussing about the brain and the nervous system, like consisting of the brain, spinal cord, and sensory neuron, motor neuron, relay neuron. Based on that, first of all, we need to understand what is sensitivity. Obviously, that's an ability to respond to the changes in the surrounding environment or external environment, or even to the internal environment, as we had uh, seen yesterday. So the respond is usually a form of a beneficial movement to the organism. Either you move away from the danger or toward certain food stuff and likewise. Now, in vertebrates or in generally in many of the organism, the role of the nervous system will be that obviously it helps the organism to adjust rapidly to the changes in the environment, as I have quoted some of the examples, and to enable the various parts of the body to coordinate with one another quickly. For example, if you're doing an exercise, not only your muscles are working, but at the same time, you need to enhance the efficiency of your respiratory system. And moreover, adrenaline will be secreted by the endocrine glands and all that. That means that all the systems are somehow coordinating with each other. They are connected with each other, and that is achieved by the nervous system in our body. So many actions that are performed by the mammals are automatic or involuntary. For example, heartbeat. You cannot hold your heartbeat. Neither you can stop peristalsis after eating food. Even if you are sleeping, peristalsis will continue. Same is the case with breathing. You can hold your breath for a while, but not permanently. Some activities are controlled consciously. For example, all the roles played by the voluntary muscles. So both voluntary and involuntary actions, they are controlled by the certain fragments of our brain or the nervous system. Some of the roles are played by the spinal cord as well. Now, we can divide our nervous system into central nervous system and into peripheral nervous system. Now, this central nervous system, which forms the main axis of our body, as you can see here, it makes the brain and the spinal cord. So, brain and spinal cord together makes the central nervous system, whereas the peripheral nervous system consists of the cranial nerves from the brain. Like these, cranium is the term used for the bone that protects our brain. So all either sensory or motor neurons that originate from the brain, those are called as cranial neurons, and collectively they called as the nerves. Okay, Raida, so can you please discriminate between the nerves and the neuron?
So the neurons are the neurons when they're collectively when you combine them they make a nerve.
Good. So you could say, you can make an analogy that in an electric wire, a lot of copper wires have been insulated in the plastic sheet. So that plastic wire is can make an analogy for the nerve, whereas all the individual copper wires in it act as a nerve, yeah, neuron, sorry, for the neuron. So a bunch of the neurons working together is called as a nerve. So cranial nerves are the nerves that are connected to the brain. In the same way, the spinal nerves, spinal as the name depicts, so they are attached to the spinal cord. Moreover, we have sense organs, for example, skin, our nose, eyes, and taste buds. These are the sense organs we have. So they intact they remain intact with the environment and bring about the changes or bring about the notices of changes happening around us. And here you can see the central nervous system, as I said, that is made up of brain and spinal cord, whereas uh, the peripheral nervous system, it has mainly three type of neurons. I'm elaborating on the peripheral nervous system, that it is made up of sensory neurons, it is made up of motor neurons, whereas in brain and in spinal cord there are two type of, there is only single type of nerve present, that is called as relay neuron. So in total in our body we have three type of neurons: sensory, motor, and relay neuron. You can further discriminate uh, uh, for their presence in the body, for their location in the body. Otherwise, their functions are totally different. We will soon look into their specific functions. In the same diagram, you can also find how position-wise they are different from each other. The sensory neuron, motor neuron, and relay neuron makes the CNS, central nervous system, and peripheral nervous system. Okay, having said that, the nervous system, which consists of the sense organs, the receptors that receives the stimuli. Okay, now Ramin Farhan, where is sorry, what is the stimuli? Ramin, bete बताएं.
Sir, I'm not sure. I haven't heard of it.
You haven't heard of it. Okay, never mind. Yon Khan, any idea?
No, sir.
No, Arham.
Isn't it like a change?
Yes, any change in the surrounding, either external environment or internal environment. So any of the change, for example, glucose level, if it being changed, that's a stimulus. Uh, in the surrounding weather, if it's getting cooler or hotter, so that's the stimuli that will be perceived by the receptors. We have different type of receptors. Some of them are adapted for temperature changes. Some of them are adapted for the stimulus of light. For example, the rod and cones in our eyes. These are the specialized receptor cells for the light. Those are also called as photoreceptors. So they keep the CNS informed of any change in the surrounding. And how they do so? They inform through nerve impulses. It's an electrical charge movement. You will study that in your A2, that how it works. But anyways, you can make an analogy. It's in the same way. It works in the same way as an electrical charge moves across the wire. So the nerve impulses are electrical impulses and they are transmitted by the nerves, like the cranial nerves or by the spinal nerves. So nerve impulse is transmitted with a fraction, within a fraction of a second, means it's so quick. Once a stimulus is perceived by the brain, so the CNS can passes an order to the effectors. Now, most of the time, the effectors are the muscles. Effectors are the muscles most of the time, not in all times. In the same way, glands could be the effectors, means which work according to the order from the CNS. That is called as an effector. So the nervous system is a device for gathering, transmitting, and interpreting information. Now, if I go back, and when we were talking about the relay neurons, so you can have an understanding that their job is in interpretation of information, whereas bringing and carrying forward is the job done by the sensory neuron, bringing of information, or carrying of an order is a job done by the sensory and motor neuron, where an interpretation is done by the relay neuron, which make up your brain. As we already said, that nervous tissue is made up of specialized cells, which you called as neurons. So their
Wait,
shape,
sir, could you go to
size.
the previous slide for 1 second?
Yes, man, we can
I just
go.
want to read this real quick.
Any question from here, Arham?
Yeah, what do you mean by um yeah, the CNS will send impulses to the muscles.
So that will be nerve impulse.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay,
So
as we
yeah,
said, send impulses, nerve impulses to the muscles. The muscles are acting as an effectors. They will carry out action according to those instructions.
understand.
Okay. Now we can have three type of neurons: sensory, motor, and relay neuron. Soon we will see that. Observe this. Observe how. Oops. Observe how it's happening here. Can you feel a movement of an electrical impulse herein across the neuron or the nerve? So you can look at all the labels of a nerve cell. Just ignore most of them, but I will relate. Like here, you can find the nucleus in the cell body. In the cell body, whereas these extensions are called as dendrites. Here we have the cytoplasmic projection called as the axon. So cytoplasm is not confined here only to the cell body. It is projecting outward. It is projecting outward, as you can see here in axon. Moreover, these are the Schwann cells which secrete a fat layer that is also called as myelin sheath. So the Schwann cells have an ability to secrete fats. Those fat deposits are called as myelin sheaths, where you cannot find those fat deposits here. So you can find these breaks. Here it means that myelin sheath is discontinuous. Wherever myelin sheath is discontinuous, that region is called as nodes of Ranvier. Those are called as node of Ranvier. Our objective at the moment is to have an understanding that where is the position of the cell body. On the basis of that, we can discriminate between the various types of the neurons. So here you can see, you can find it's a complete representation of a motor neuron. Now the function of the motor neuron is to bring an order, is to carry forward an order from the central nervous system, like from the brain or from spinal cord, to the effectors. So you can look at the direction of the nerve impulse. It's moving away from the cell body. So the take home point is that you can conclude that cell body of a motor neuron is located to the sidewise. I'm just skipping these details. Okay, so we have three type of neurons: sensory, motor, and intermediate or relay neuron. Look at that difference. Look at their function. Their job is to transmit impulses from sense organs to the receptors, or receptors to the CNS, central nervous system. Whereas motor neurons, they'll have to transmit impulses from CNS to the effectors. Whereas, as I said, intermediate neurons or relay neurons, they make up the central nervous system, and their job is to interpret the data. Now, take your time and look at all these structures.
Wait,
Some
sir,
of you need to
which one interprets them?
these diagrams.
No, no,
Okay,
no.
okay.
Oh,
Hold on. The relay neurons.
okay.
Now, take your time, look at all these diagrams. Any of you need to like briefly talk about that, how you can find out the discriminating points between these three structures.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, yes,
Where are
please,
these
right?
dendrites? Dendrites.
Okay, these are the sensitive parts. These are the sensitive parts of a neuron. They can detect any change in the surrounding. Like that change could be in the form of positive and negative charges. In your A2, you will see that these neurons are negatively charged inside and positively charged outside. So there is a potential difference exists. Now that potential difference is generated by these dendrites. How? Well, leave that for future, for your A1, A2, sorry, A2. Okay, who would like to explain the differences in them based on their appearance?
Sir,
Anybody? Yes, please
why
go ahead.
do relay neuron has so many dendrites as compared to sensory and motor neuron?
Uh, nice, nice. Mustafa, wait a while, better. Anybody having a courage?
I think I know the answer. It's because they need to have more because they do more of the sensory work.
uh, well, Mustafa, did you ask for relay neuron or for sensory neuron?
So relay neuron.
Relay neuron. Okay, right. Never mind on that. Anybody would like to explain the differences in the shapes of these three type of neurons? Courage,
The
please.
cell bodies are located in different areas.
Yes, Raid, you are very rightly saying. Thank you. बेटे आप लोग थोड़ी कोशिश किया करें डरते क्यों हैं आप में से अक्सर लोग तो मेरे जैसे ही डरते हैं आप लोग एक्सप्लेन नहीं करते anyways our conclusion is that sensory neuron have cell body in between in the middle of the axon. Remember that, keep that in your mind. Whereas relay neuron are all together made up of the cell body. They don't have any axon. They don't have any axon because they have no need to transmit the nerve impulse over a longer distance. But motor neurons have a cell body at one side instead of the middle of the axon. Now understand. Uh, Here you have this side is your hand. So you touch an hot object. You touch the hot object. So nerve impulse will be carried all the way through axon to the CNS. So on this side we have CNS, central nervous system, either the brain or the spinal cord. So nerve impulse is brought to the relay neuron. Now they interpret that information and passes an order to the cell body of motor neuron. Motor neuron passes an order to the effectors like
The effectors are the muscles, right?
muscles. Most of the cases, not in all cases, most of the cases, they're the effectors. You can perceive the difference in their function related to their structure. Many of the times, the examiner will ask you for identification or discrimination between the three type of neurons. Please look at this description of sensory neuron. Read it for yourself. Right, Asif, can you please explain this? You can read it from here. Right.
Oh yeah, sir. So the sensory neuron basically carries the impulses from the receptor organs or sense organs to the CNS.
Right, to the spinal cord or to the brain. Arham, please.
The relay neuron. Wait, do I just read this?
Yes, of course.
Okay. The relay neuron carries impulses from sensory nerves to motor nerves.
Great. Nimra Mahmood, bete, please read this. Motor neurons.
Carries impulses from CNS to effector muscle to bring about movement or gland to bring about secretion of hormone ADH.
For example, ADH, antidiuretic hormone that controls the urination in our body. So here you can see that these like where the two neurons combine together, there is a gap in between. There is a gap in between. That gap is called as synapse. So across the synapse, in form of chemicals, a nerve impulse will be generated in the next neuron. In the next neuron, we will see that soon, that how it happens. So first of all, as a result of stimulus which is perceived by the receptors, so receptors through sensory neurons send a nerve impulse to the central nervous system, and central nervous system uh, through motor neuron passes an order to the effectors, and effectors show the response. Overall, that's a functioning of all this nervous system. You can see in
Wait,
here.
sir, could you go to the previous one? I want to take a screenshot.
Arham, I have a Facebook page with the name Biology with Muhammad Shahid. If you can like that, you can find this sort of stuff on my page. Okay.
Okay.
I'm a bit lazy for like last 2 to 3 months. I have not updated that. Otherwise, when we had the school, regular school days, so I consistently used to load materials on that. The presentations, the notes, and the posters, and this sort of stuff. So you can like that, and you can find all that stuff there. And moreover, you will be in touch with me. Okay, here the same loop has been explained, that information is detected by the sense organs, by the receptors, and they generated a nerve impulse. That nerve impulse was carried to the CNS, and remember that CNS was made up of relay neurons. So you can see here the brain interprets and decides information and passes an order accordingly, okay, to the effector, to the motor neurons, and through motor neurons, nerve impulse is carried to the muscle fiber, which either contract or relax. Here you can see that they are relaxing to work according to the instructions from the brain. In our nervous system, you can find two type of areas. One is gray matter, the other one is white matter. So gray matter mainly consists of the bodies of the neuron, like the cell bodies, whereas the white matter consists of normally the fibers, or you could say the axons. So axons are found in white area. So here, look at this diagram. Take your time. Perceive it for yourself. Then I will explain it. Now, see that impulses from the receptors are like in form of nerve impulse. They are carried through the sensory neuron, and here is the cell body in the center of the axon. So we are considering that right from the hand, till the spinal cord, there is only a single sensory neuron. There could be multiple ones as well, but we are assuming that single. Uh, if we make a cross section, you can find this as a dorsal side or a dorsal root of the spinal cord, and this one is the ventral root of the spinal cord. We perceive that you can find here dorsal root and ventral root. Okay, in dorsal root you will find a bulge, a protrusion, an outgrowth. So that bulge is called as ganglion, as I said. So this bulge is formed by the accumulation of the cell body, because the cell bodies have been accumulated here, and those are the cell bodies of the sensory neurons. Those are the cell bodies of the sensory neuron. So nerve impulse reaches out here, you can find a gap. You can find a gap between the sensory neuron and the relay neuron. Okay, so that gap is called as synapse. That gap is called as synapse. These relay neurons interpret the information. They may send the information for interpretation to the brain, or they passes an order immediately to the motor neurons, which are present in the ventral root, to the effectors, and the effectors bring out the action accordingly. Now, here, based
Wait,
on the
sir, I have
type
a
of,
question.
wait,
Uh,
Arham, just wait, let me finish it.
okay.
So based on the type of the action, if you are in case of emergency, if it's a reflex action, you have touched a hot object, or you are suffering a pinprick, in that case, information will be sent to the brain, but you will not wait for the instructions from the brain. You will not wait for the instruction from the brain. In fact, you will pass an order directly through relay neuron to the motor neuron to pull your hand back. To pull your hand back. That is an example of a reflex action. But in normal cases, information, let me trace out the nervous pathway in a normal situation. So what happens normally is that if you wanted to pick up a book, so information through sensory neuron will be sent to the relay neuron, and relay neuron passes an order, passes information to the brain. Brain interprets that information and passes order to the relay neurons of the spinal cord, and they further passes it to the motor neurons and to the effectors. The effectors pull or relax themselves to pick up the book. That was our nervous pathway for a normal voluntary action. For involuntary actions like a reflex action, the pathway will be different. We will soon see, we will trace out that pathway later on. Yes, Arham, please, your question now?
You just explained it.
Yes, this is what I was waiting for. Okay. Now the thing is that if in a reflex section um, you passes an order to the motor neurons, my question is then how you get to know about your hand had touched a hot object? How you get to know about that? Anybody wanted to
So
answer?
the thermoreceptors in the skin.
No, bete, that those thermoreceptors generated the nerve impulse from the sensory neuron.
Oh, okay.
As I just said, that information will be sent to the brain, but you are not waiting for the instructions from the brain. But information was sent to the brain.
It's a
Okay?
reflex action or something,
Yeah,
right?
that's in case of a reflex action. Exactly. We will see that. First of all, go through this normal voluntary action and reflex action, that how it happens. This is exactly I was explaining to you people. So far, any question by anybody? No question.
No,
Can
sir.
we,
No.
right, okay, right, can we move ahead?
Okay.
Right. We have several types of reflex action. Knee jerk, withdrawal of hand touching hot objects, sneezing, coughing, blushing, stretching, and salivation once you see tasty food, juicy food. How a reflex action or in case of knee jerk happens. Okay, you can carry out that little experimentation as illustrated herein. So reflex action is a simplistic form of a response in higher animals. Sudden withdrawal of hand once touching a hot object. Oops. So how it works? One by one, follow all the steps. Step one, the stimulates the receptors of the skin. Nerve impulse is sent to the spinal cord through sensory neuron, through dorsal root into the spinal cord. So the nerve impulses are transmitted first across the synapse to the relay neurons, and the nerve impulses are subsequently transmitted across another synapse neuron and also sent to the brain. This is what I was saying, to the brain at the same time, but you are not waiting for the instructions. So nerve impulses leave the spinal cord through
Sir,
dorsal root
this process take place in seconds.
in a fraction of seconds. You do not, if you get an electric shock, you will not wait for to pull your hand back. It will automatically will be pulled back. Okay, even unconsciously, you won't even get to know. So you get to know later once information reaches to the brain. Otherwise, you can try touching a hot object. So the nerve impulse passes on to the effectors, and you pull your hand back. So the sequence, please go through the sequence for yourself. Okay, continuing that. Okay, now we have two types of reflex action based on which one is the nearest center. Blinking of the eye is one of the type of reflex action, but in that case, the nearest center is the brain, not the spinal cord. So you call that type of reflex action as cranial reflex because that is coordinated by the brain. Rest of it, touching a hot object, that is a spinal reflex. So you have example of spinal reflex as controlled by the spinal cord, and for cranial reflex that is controlled by the brain. So blinking or reducing the size of the pupil is a reflex action. Blinking of the eye and solvation, these are all the cranial reflex action. So reflex arc, like in this diagram, this entire nervous pathway, starting from 1, 2, 3, 4, not 5, ignore 5, 6, 7. This entire nervous pathway, is called as reflex arc. Arc is the pathway. Okay, so the nervous pathway that makes up or through which a reflex action is carried out, that is called as reflex arc. So a reflex arc consists of a receptor, a sensory neuron, reflex center, either brain or spinal cord, the effector. The effector could be, motor neuron, and the effector could be the muscles or the glands. Same illustration of a reflex action, but in this time it's the pinprick. Then here we have another diagram illustrating the same reflex action. Okay. Here onward, we will continue tomorrow. If you have any question, you can ask me.
Right, sir. So the synapses are located in the motor neurons, right? Or the relay neurons.
No. Synapse are the gaps between the sensory and relay neuron and between relay and motor neuron. These are the gaps.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Any question? Right. Take care. Allah Hafiz.